This is The World This Weekend. Hello, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Coming up, Israel has released what it calls proof that Hamas was operating beneath Gaza's biggest hospital, while the conditions inside it remain desperate.
The hospital has essentially stopped functioning. It's been choked off from all its supply lines. The doctors and nurses there say, we're just unable to provide care.
And as the death toll in Gaza climbs, demonstrations in Canada put more pressure on Ottawa.
Canada is extremely concerned about the number of civilian casualties in Gaza.
Also on the program, it's the Grey Cup. Hamilton is full of fans as Winnipeg takes on Montreal. Plus, we'll tell you about a Grey Cup mystery. That's later. But first, air strikes continue to cross Gaza today as Israel released what it says is further proof that Hamas gunmen were using the Al-Shifa hospital as a base. Officials have released a series of videos. They say some of those videos show that at least 2 hostages were taken to the hospital. Briar Stewart has the story.
This is 7th of October, 10:55 a.m.
Israeli Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari stands in front of a screen pointing to what he says is a video taken from Al-Shifa Hospital on the morning of October 7th, just a few hours after Hamas launched its brutal attack on Israel. He says it clearly shows that Hamas was using Gaza's largest hospital as a hub. He says one video shows gunmen pulling up to the sprawling medical facility in an Israeli jeep and bringing in 2 hostages, one from Thailand and one from Nepal. On the video, one appears to be dragged in uninjured, while the other is on a hospital bed with a stomach wound.
We have not yet located both of these hostages and rescued them.
But Hagari says they do know what happened to another hostage, 19-year-old Noah Marciano, a soldier who was found dead last week. He says there's evidence that she was murdered in the hospital. Hagari also released another edited video which he says shows a sophisticated 55-meter-long tunnel towards Al-Shifa, with a door designed to withstand explosions and a hole militants can fire through.
The truth is clear. Hamas wages war from hospital.
Hamas has denied that allegation and has said it took hostages to the hospital for medical treatment. The videos, which cannot be verified by CBC News, have been released by Israel after an international outcry when its special forces raided the Al-Shifa hospital. A team from the World Health Organization described the facility as a death zone after a brief visit. Inside a hospital in southern Gaza, 31 tiny, frail infants share incubators. The premature babies were moved from Al-Shifa today, but 2 others died just before the evacuation. Doctors said there was not enough clean water in Al-Shifa to mix the formula, and some of the babies suffered from vomiting and diarrhea. Dr. Mohammed Salama is the head of the neonatal ICU department at the Al-Hilal El Amarati Maternity Hospital in southern Gaza.
The cases arrived to us complain of hypothermia, hypoglycemia, and a lot of cases are septic.
It's expected that tomorrow the infants will be moved to Egypt. No family members came with them because the Ministry of Health says they couldn't find any. The UN agency that works in Gaza says in the past 6 weeks, 176 people sheltering in its facilities have been killed. This weekend, 2 of its schools were hit.
And every day they're like, this is the worst day of my life.
Shayna Lowe is with the Norwegian Refugee Council. The humanitarian organization has more than 50 staff in Gaza.
How many innocent people have to die? Every time we can't reach our colleagues in Gaza, we wonder if they are victims too.
Israel has warned people in southern Gaza to move further west as it gets set to launch more strikes and a ground operation, which will undoubtedly make the unfolding humanitarian crisis even worse. Officials say there's not enough food, water, or fuel, but now plenty of rain on top of already dismal living conditions. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
There are signs there could soon be a deal to release some of the hostages being held by Hamas. Qatar's Prime Minister says negotiators are working out logistical issues.
Our focus is to make sure that the release is happening safely and there are also the humanitarian issues of the Gaza Strip to be addressed in that deal.
The details aren't known, but reporting from the Washington Post suggests a deal could see some hostages released in exchange for a 5-day pause in the fighting. The White House and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu say no deal has been reached yet, and that about 240 people have been held hostage in Gaza since the October 7th attacks. Here at home, calls for a ceasefire persist. Demonstrators gathered on Parliament Hill again today to make their voices heard. It's adding pressure to the federal government as the war rages on and the death toll climbs. JP Tasker reports.
The grisly scenes in Gaza have prompted an outcry in Canada.
Why this happening? Why hospitals being bombed?
This man, Dr. Adel El-Fatori from Pembroke, Ontario, says he's protesting because he's horrified by what's transpired at Al-Shifa Hospital, a place the United Nations calls a death zone.
I have colleagues who died. I have doctors who cry every day because they couldn't deal with the stress they have.
Hundreds of activists are staging weekly protests on Parliament Hill, asking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to ramp up the pressure on Israel. Protest organizer Amar Fama.
You don't have to be a hero to denounce killing of women and kids. Every single decent human being should be doing that. We are asking the Prime Minister for more.
Across the country, people have taken to the streets, some with an anti-war message calling out the Prime Minister directly.
Justin Trudeau hands are red! Justin Trudeau's hands are red! 50,000 people dead!
While others support Israel's right to defend itself.
We all know that Hamas started this war on October the 7th.
That's left Prime Minister Justin Trudeau feeling the political heat.
Canada is extremely concerned about the number of civilian casualties in Gaza.
As the death toll rises, there's been a shift in Ottawa's messaging.
The pathway towards a secure, viable, independent Jewish state alongside a secure, viable, independent Palestinian state is getting more difficult with all the hardship that Palestinians are going through.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has made it clear who he blames for that hardship.
I'd like to offer my full condemnation of Hamas for using Palestinian civilians as human shields.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants Canada to take a staunch pro-Israel position, saying in a social media post that named Trudeau, the forces of civilization must back Israel in defeating Hamas barbarism.
Both prime ministers actually meant to say the same thing.
Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moed, was dispatched to smooth over bilateral tensions.
The point is really that we understand that those who are innocent should stay out of harm's way.
The Prime Minister has held off calling for a ceasefire despite the demands of some activists. The government is instead backing a sustained pause in the fighting to get aid in and hostages out. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
Toronto police have charged a man in connection with multiple hate-motivated assaults. The suspect was only detained after worshippers at the mosque he allegedly attacked chased and restrained him before help arrived. As Philip Lee Shannock tells us, it's left the people who were there deeply shaken.
He had like a deep hatred for us, a very deep hatred. We could see it in his actions and in his statements.
Shafni Nalir says banging on the window of the mosque on a busy stretch of Yonge Street in downtown Toronto is not unusual. But what happened next has the community worried.
The first time we thought it could have been anyone just hitting the windows. That's kind of normal to us. But if he came back with a rock and said what he said, so we were worried he's going to come back again.
Police say a man confronted worshippers leaving morning prayers at the Toronto Islamic Centre yelling slurs. He then threw a palm-sized rock at an elderly man. Worshippers had to chase him down and restrain him before police arrived. Police say 28-year-old Chandler Marshall has been charged with 17 counts in all for 3 hate-motivated incidents. Uthman Quick of the National Council of Canadian Muslims says there's been an increase in cases reported across the country of schools and mosques vandalized. He blames increasing hateful rhetoric for inciting the violence, and the targets are not just Muslims.
We're receiving incidents and reports of people who are not Muslims, who are Jewish, who are Christian, who are being targeted, who are being threatened because of their advocacy for Palestine, for example. So this is something that goes across society.
This has been the predominant news story now for weeks and weeks and weeks on television and on social media.
Michael Mostyn is the CEO of B'nai B'rith Canada. He says anti-Semitic incidents have exploded across the country since October 7th, and he's horrified to hear about the attack outside the Toronto Islamic Centre.
There are many others that really have no skin in the game, and some of them, there are individuals in various social issues that sometimes just get involved because they want to cause problems, and they enjoy the chaos that can ensue.
Back at the mosque, Nalir agrees.
We're hearing about the attacks in the Jewish community as well, and I can only imagine what they're going through as well. So, what we'd like to do is take a united stand against stuff like this. This shouldn't happen to anyone.
But he says emotions are running high, and Canadians at large are not immune. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, Muslim organizations say they are dealing with growing Islamophobia in Canadian schools, and Muslim students say they're experiencing more bullying since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. Experts are advising school boards on what to do. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson reports.
University of Calgary professor Rahad Zaidi proudly shows off collages made by high school students, part of an art project about identity. The university professor has worked with school boards in rural Alberta using art projects to help fight prejudice against Muslim students.
Female students who are wearing the hijab, a very common racial slur that these students confront in their everyday lives is, why are you wearing this piece of cloth on your head?
While Islamophobia is not a new problem in Canadian schools, Zaidi says the Israel-Hamas war has intensified it.
It is in times of war that you witness a hardening of identities. Everybody becomes aware of ethnic origins, where they're coming from.
It's something they have noted at Nasiha, a mental health hotline focusing on Muslim youth. Muhsin Kermali is the director of the organization.
We've had a 600% increase in calls regarding the conflict happening right now in Gaza and Israel. Overall, what we're seeing is this notion that people are not feeling that they're equally heard. Since the conflict has started, especially the youth, they feel like they're not being recognized and supported in what they're suffering and what they're going through.
A recent Senate report on Islamophobia in Canada found it is a daily reality for many Muslims and called for urgent action. One of the report's key recommendations: launch a multimedia campaign and educational resources on Islamophobia that can be incorporated into classrooms. And yet, the Peel District School Board outside of Toronto is the first and so far only in Canada to implement a board-wide strategy for fighting Islamophobia. It includes annual training for teachers on how to be sensitive to the needs of Muslim students. Still, it's unclear how many teachers so far received courses or resources on how to put the strategy into practice.
They had completed the strategy, which was the first step. But now I think community is kind of holding their breath and waiting, right?
In the meantime, Khan is giving guest lectures to Teachers College students, the educators of tomorrow, on how to support their Muslim students. She's also advising the biggest school board in the country, the Toronto District School Board. That school board, as well as the one in London, Ontario, have passed resolutions to develop strategies to fight Islamophobia. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
Voters in Argentina took to the polls today in a closely contested presidential runoff election. Supporters of Libertarian candidate Javier Milei chanted as he cast his ballot in the capital, Buenos Aires. Milei is in a tight race with the country's economy minister, Sergio Massa. The economy has been top of mind for many voters who are dealing with widespread poverty and an inflation rate of nearly 150%. Massa says his government experience will help bring the country out of its economic crisis, while Milei, a political outsider, is promising to, quote, tear down the political status quo. The winner is expected to take office on December 10th. Myanmar's military junta is facing its biggest challenge since it took control of the country in a 2021 coup d'etat. Rebel groups, mostly in northern Myanmar, have launched a coordinated offensive, capturing towns and military outposts. Freelance reporter Adam Bema has more.
In the city of Loikaw, near the border with Thailand,
Wounded Myanmar troops exit a building waving dirty white shirts. A rebel leader tells them his forces will treat them humanely. The rebels, called the Karenni Nationalities Defense Force, seized most parts of Loikaw from the military on Thursday. The KNDF coordinates with Myanmar's National Unity Government, the democratic opposition to the military junta. Chozo is the spokesperson of the National Unity Government.
This is the time for them to switch side, siding with the people. This is the only way to guarantee their safety and their family safety, also for the country.
Myanmar's military overthrew the government led by Aung San Suu Kyi in a 2021 coup. The 78-year-old Suu Kyi has been sentenced to 27 years in prison on what her supporters say are trumped-up charges. On October 27th, rebel groups coordinated with the National Unity Government to launch multiple offensives against the junta.
This Order Spot 27 operation is not just a regular military operation. It is the operation with a political objective to end the military dictatorship.
A union of rebel groups called the Brotherhood Alliance attacked military outposts in Shan State, near Myanmar's border with China. The rebels have seized more than 160 bases and now control 5 towns, 2 being critical trading routes with China. In Myanmar's central Zagang region, the NUG seized Kowloon, its first district-level town, last week.
We are setting up right now the administration and then providing the government services as well.
The NUG launched a campaign called Road to Naypyidaw in an effort to take back the capital.
Nobody can tell the timeline, but its military is collapsing quickly. We need to prepare for post-junta transition period.
Myanmar junta spokesperson Zaw Min Tun admitted the military is under heavy assault. He did not respond to an interview request from the CBC. The military has warned Naypyidaw residents to be ready for attacks. Battalions have been ordered to defend the capital to the death. According to the United Nations, 200,000 people have fled recent fighting. The number of internally displaced persons across Myanmar now exceeds 2 million. Adam Bema for CBC News in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
Former U.S. First Lady Rosalind Carter has died. Dubbed the Steel Magnolia by the political press, Carter served in the White House alongside her husband, peanut farmer turned president Jimmy Carter. Rosalind Carter often sat in on her husband's cabinet meetings, and White House aides privately called them co-presidents. They were the longest married presidential couple, having wed in 1946 when Rosalind was just 18 and Jimmy was 21.
Growing up, I didn't think I would ever get married. I didn't like boys. I didn't know how to talk to them. And then along came Jimmy Carter, and my life's been an adventure ever since.
In a statement today, the former president said Rosalind was my equal partner in everything I ever accomplished. After leaving Washington, they founded the Carter Center with the goal of advancing human rights. But Rosalind's most lasting legacy is her effort to reduce the stigma around mental illness, as well as her fight for increased access to mental health treatment. Rosalind Carter was 96 years old. 60 years ago this week in Dallas, 3 shots rang out from the Texas School Board Depository and forever changed a nation. A visibly emotional Walter Cronkite broke the news on CBS.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
Ripple effects from the assassination of President John F. Kennedy by Lee Harvey Oswald are still felt to this day. Steve Futterman spoke to people from all over the world who went to Dallas to mark the anniversary.
60 years later, they still come to the place where it happened.
We're here in Dealey Plaza, which is the site of one of the most horrific events in American history. It's the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
Even if they weren't alive in 1963, people are able to connect with this event.
Well, I'm for the first time in Dallas,
I came here for business.
The morning we went, we came across Marius Dobrescu from Romania. He wanted to come to this exact spot.
So this is the hill.
This is where he was driving, right here on this street.
Yeah, with the car.
I'm 82 years old, and so I do remember where I was standing when I heard the news.
Many who visit, of course, were alive when it happened. For them, the memories are different.
In Los Angeles City College, I was a student there. And when the news rang out, everybody just stood still and couldn't believe it.
I was 10 years old in the 6th grade. My mother was picking me up at school.
Nan Whitaker traveled to Dallas from Knoxville, Tennessee. She remembers explicit details.
Did you cry? Did your mother cry?
I wanted to.
You're emotional even right now. Tell me why.
The memories.
This woman came with her 2 teenage daughters.
We're from Wales in the United Kingdom, and it's just something you have to see, really.
What do you know about the assassination?
Well, I know that was the first shot and that was the second shot, and his wife was in the car and was trying to climb out, and it was from the 6th floor of that window.
She had, blood on her pink Chanel dress as well.
And this man lives just outside Vancouver.
It was such a momentous moment in history and changed the course of so much. So just, first time to Dallas, and it was the one thing I wanted to make sure that I saw while I was here.
Then there are the people who have theories about what took place.
It's pretty obvious the CIA had him killed,
Oh, so you believe in a conspiracy?
100%. There's too much evidence.
I'm of the professional opinion that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole assassin.
Ferris Rockstool was a schoolboy in Dallas in 1963. He eventually became an FBI analyst and historian. He believes there was only one killer. The lingering mystery for him.
One thing that no one can answer to this day, 60 years later, is why. Oswald didn't leave behind any sort of writings that would say, this is why I did it. He didn't tell anyone, his close friends.
Stephen Fagan, the curator at the Dallas Museum devoted to the assassination, believes there will always be suspicions.
We do live in a conspiracy culture, and while there certainly were conspiracy theories prior to 1963, the Kennedy assassination kind of crystallized that very distinctly, I think, American mindset that, there's got to be more to the story. The government's not telling us everything.
Most likely came from the grassy knoll, and this was most likely a conspiracy.
Hundreds of thousands visit Dealey Plaza each year. This week, the numbers are expected to be larger than usual. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Dallas.
Well, the winter holidays will be a little less sweet this year in Western Canada. A bitter strike at a Vancouver refinery has led to sugar shortages. Yvette Brand reports.
Slow down.
Burnaby baker Holly Fraser hoists a 20-kilogram bag of sugar onto the counter. She's desperate to find enough sugar to keep her vibrant pastry case stocked.
So everything in our cases requires sugar. Are we going to have enough product for Christmas? If we don't have sugar to be able to do our products, then we won't last until February.
138 workers at Rogers Sugar Refinery began striking on September the 28th. Key concerns included wages and a plan to shift the 135-year-old plant to 24-hour production. Adrian Soldera is president of the Public and Private Workers of Canada Local 8.
But again, it's that work-life balance and, having people work these long hours and spending more time at work than you are with your family.
J.S. Couillard is Vice President of Finance for Rogers Sugar in Montreal.
The demand for sugar in Canada is growing.
Canada produces about 1.2 million tons of sugar a year. Rogers Sugar Inc. and Atlantic are responsible for more than half of that. So far, the shortage is hurting Western Canadian businesses the most. The Vancouver plant is still operating, but at a reduced capacity. That's translated into empty shelves at some grocery stores and a real concern for bakers like Fraser, who burns through 10 bags of icing sugar a week at this time of year.
Yeah, so we've just pretty much gone to Costco, Thrifties, Save-On, and I've loaded my car up. I look really weird when I'm walking out with a full trolley full of icing sugar or just normal sugar. But that's the only way we can do it. If we can't get the icing sugar through our suppliers or the regular sugar through our suppliers, we're toast.
Right now, suppliers are limiting bakers to 2 bags of sugar each delivery.
It's like gut-wrenching, breaks my heart.
Fraser is hoping the sugar shortage doesn't bring her dream business to a bitter end. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Australia's national cricket team hoists the ICC Cricket World Cup trophy. The Aussies beat host team India in 6 wickets to win the title. Australian captain Pat Cummins.
I think that's the pinnacle of international cricket, winning a one-day World Cup, especially over here in India in front of a crowd like this. You only get a shot at it every 4 years.
But outside the Narendra Modi Stadium, it was a more somber tone. Tens of thousands of India fans shuffled out of the stadium, heads hung low. India entered the final on a 10-game winning streak and was the favourite to win.
This is just sad. Like, we've been unbeatable this entire tournament, and this was just, I'm just feeling numb right now. Like, there's no feeling. I want to cry, but there are no tears. It's just numb.
Australia has now won the Cricket World Cup 6 times since the tournament started in 1975. That's 3 times as many championships as any other national team. To sports in this country now, and tonight's Grey Cup showdown is a battle between 2 giant teams pitting East against West. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers are playing the Montreal Alouettes for the CFL Championship in Hamilton, Ontario. The CBC's Jamie Strachan is at tonight's game and has followed both teams. We spoke to him earlier. So, Jamie, these 2 teams took very different roads to tonight's game. Can you tell us a little about that?
Stephanie, they sure did. You have the Winnipeg Blue Bombers representing the West. Really, CFL royalty these days. The team is making its 4th straight Grey Cup appearance. The Bombers really through the regular season, winning 14 of 18 games to earn its spot in this year's Grey Cup. Montreal, a very different path. At one point in the season, this team was 6-7, seemingly going nowhere. They haven't lost a game since, knocking off the league best Toronto Argonauts last week in the Eastern Conference Final in Toronto to earn its place in the Grey Cup. The franchise making its first appearance in more than a decade. So really on one side you have Winnipeg, who no one's surprised is here. On the other side you have Montreal, who has been surprising people all season long.
And you've been in Hamilton for a couple of days now in the lead up to this game. What's the atmosphere been like?
Well, this is really always a celebration, the week leading up to the Grey Cup, a celebration for Canadian football and for Canadian football fans. For people here in Hamilton who definitely would have liked to have seen their hometown Ticats in the game, welcome the rest of the CFL community. I have to say, the Winnipeg fans far outnumbering the Montreal Alouettes. The Bomber fans seemingly traveling well. The atmosphere has been great all week, kind of a friendly rivalry. 2 storied CFL football franchises battling this year for the 110th edition of the Grey Cup. Stephanie?
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks, Stephanie. Pleasure to be with you.
That's Jamie Strachan in Hamilton.
Don't wanna be an American idiot.
Here's what Grey Cup fans have been rocking out to. Green Day is playing the halftime show this year. There have been a lot of memorable Grey Cup acts over the years. Who could forget Shania Twain arriving by dog sled in 2017? But there's also one show that was completely forgettable. A few days ago, someone on Reddit posed the question,
can we finally solve the 1999 halftime mystery?
Night skies finish last. You're running out of gas.
What he'd noticed is that Wikipedia lists the 1999 halftime act as a confusingly named group called the Parabologics, but with no explanation of who they were. Other Reddit detectives got to work.
Could it have been a military band? Para could be short for paratroopers.
My guess would be the cover band from a local Christian school, Parable.
I was at that game. First row, 55-yard line, section 243, I think. I have zero recollection.
The CBC broadcast of that Ticats Stampeders game ignores any halftime show, going right into analysis.
What a 30 minutes of football for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. So let's join Steve.
CBC Vancouver reporter John Aspiri decided to dive in.
I went to the CBC archives and I asked around, and they said we have no information about the Paraplegics whatsoever. CBC Sports They said they went to the shot list of the 1999 Grey Cup and had no reference. I messaged Grant Lawrence of CBC Music.
Yes.
He said he had never heard of the band. Yeah, my searches have kind of been fruitless.
Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me.
Finally, back on Reddit, a possible breakthrough. One user remembers a competition of 20 high school dance teams and says,
the winner got to perform with a melange of CFL cheerleaders from at least 10 teams.
So, mystery solved? We'll leave that with you to decide, plus a little more Green Day. This has been The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Thanks for listening.
He said my life's a bore.